So today we're going to talk about how to format a screenplay. Now, writing a screenplay is a little different from writing, say, a novel or a short story, because weirdly enough, screenplays are not intended to be read. They're intended to be filmed and produced. Screenplays had to be written in a very specific format, so 1 page of script equals 1 minute on screen. Also, if you're sending your scripts to actors, or producers, or even screenwriting competitions, you want to make sure that everything is formatted correctly. Otherwise, if you just go off and do your own thing, it's a sign that you're an amateur and you will not be taken seriously, and they will throw your script away. And we don't want that. This video will be great for new writers and even experienced writers who've written a couple scripts before. So here is how to format your screenplay. Now, the first thing you're going to need is a screenwriting software. Now, there's a lot of options out there that I will link to below. I personally like to use Final Draft, but I'll also link to a couple of free options. It doesn't really matter which one you use because they're all pretty similar, but whatever you do, please do not use Microsoft Word. It will drive you f***ing insane. And more importantly, it will drive me insane. You're going to spend way too much time formatting, messing with margins, playing with fonts than doing actual writing. So now that you've got your screenwriting software open, we'll go through each of the different elements of a screenplay. You have slug lines, also known as scene headers, action, character names, dialogue, parentheticals, shots, and transitions. Slug lines are used at the beginning of every scene, and they should be written in all caps. And they have 3 different parts. First, you have interior or exterior, abbreviated, which tells us if the scene is indoors or outdoors. Then you have the location, and then you have day or night, which tells us when the scene takes place. You can also put dusk or dawn if you want to be specific, but for the most part, stick to day or night. Now, you'll want to use a scene header for the very beginning of every single scene. And you start a new scene whenever there is a passage of time or your character moves to a new location. There's a couple of variations you can do, which I'll explain right now. If you have one scene that immediately follows the other, you can put continuous. If it's the same exact scene, but a bit of time has passed, you can put later. And if it's a flashback, you can indicate that it's a flashback. Now, that's it. Don't mess around with this. Don't try to mess with the font or punctuation. Don't try to get creative with the time of day. Don't try to label the sequence in any way. And also, don't cut any of these. If it's an interior scene, we still need to know if it's day or night. Next, we have action, which is probably the most important part of your script, because this is where you're going to be describing what's actually happening in your film. So you want to make sure you're writing in the present tense and using active verbs. So if you have a character who's walking into a store, you'll want to write, Cassidy walks into the store, because we see that happening right in front of us. Not Cassidy walked, and not Cassidy is walking, because that's passive. Now, there's nothing wrong with using gerunds in your script, but don't make that the active verb. For example, Cassidy walks into the store hiding his gun in the back of his pants. This works because the primary verb here is walks, and hiding is secondary. This also brings me to my next point. You can also capitalize important props or sound effects if you want to draw attention to them. But don't go overboard with this. Action is also where you'll be introducing your characters to us when we see them for the very first time. So when a character first appears on screen, you always want to capitalize their name, just the first time we see them. Then you'll also want to put their age, as well as a couple of physical traits and a couple of character traits, so we can start to get a sense of who this person is and what their vibe is like. A couple of other things you want to keep in mind when you're writing action is you only want to write what we can physically see on screen. We can't see feelings. We can't see thoughts. So don't tell us what your character is thinking. You need to show us a character's thoughts by their actions or tell us through dialogue. Also, when you're writing action, try to break it up on the page. Try to avoid giant paragraphs of description. You don't need to tell us every little detail that's in the room or every little thing that the character's wearing. So please don't let your scripts look like this. But at the same time, you gotta give us some detail. So don't let your script look like this either. Next, we have character names and dialogue. Now, this is pretty self-explanatory. The character names are the names of your characters, and dialogue are the words that they say. There's a couple things you want to keep in mind. If a character is not on screen, but they're still speaking, you can put OS next to their name to indicate that they are off screen. If a character is telling us what's happening, if they're narrating a story to us, you can indicate that by putting VO to tell us that it is a voiceover. If your characters are in a heated argument and they're constantly cutting each other off, you can indicate that by cutting off their line with a couple dashes and picking it up with the next line. And if they're really going at it and they're talking over each other, you can do dual dialogue. Next, we have parentheticals. This describes how a particular line is said. You can use this to tell us if a character's talking to multiple people, or if they're speaking another language, if there's subtitles, or if there's something that changes the way they deliver the line. Now, a lot of new writers will write everything in parentheticals, which drives me crazy. You don't want to be directing the actor on the page. You want to give them some creative trust and some creative control over how they will portray that character. So a lot of description or ideas that you have for dialogue, you can also put in the action lines. Finally, we have shots and transitions. Now, for the most part, you don't really need to use these, and I would actually encourage you not to use them unless it's for a very specific stylistic choice. When you're reading camera directions on a script, it takes you out of the story, it takes you out of that world, and it's distracting to your reader. And if you're sending your script to a producer or agent, it's just unnecessary. A shot just indicates any type of camera placement or camera movement. Transitions indicate how we move from the end of one scene to the beginning of the next. The most common ones are fade in at the very beginning of your film, fade out at the very end of your film, or my personal favorite, cut to black. So that's basically it. That's how to format a screenplay. And the good news is that if you have a screenwriting software, it will take care of a lot of this for you. So you can just focus on writing your story. So thank you so much for watching. If this video was helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more. And I wish you the best of luck on writing that script.